Thank you guys. I want to first and say thank you all for showing up today. As y'all know, we have filed a lawsuit in my law firm, Abraham Watkins, in conjunction with Andy Williams' office, has filed this lawsuit. And you guys know from our press conference what it's about. My client, VJ Sharuvu, is here today. And what this case is about is his 11-year-old son, who was branded with third-degree burns by hot branding irons without his knowledge and without his consent. This happened to an 11-year-old boy who's an honor student here in Sugar Land. This is a good boy who we've designated as TC in the lawsuit to protect his identity. But essentially what happened is my client, VJ Sharuvu, and his ex-wife share custody of TC. And on this one particular weekend, August 5th, 2023, when VJ did not have custody of his son was taken to a temple in Sugar Land, who we've listed in our lawsuit as the Ashtalakshmi Temple, run by Jet USA as well, where TC was part of a ceremony where what we believe was 97 adults and 3 children were taken here, and they were branded as part of this particular ceremony, as part of this particular sect. Now, one thing we want to make clear is this is not a ceremony that is widely used across Hinduism. This is something that's a very small sect, and this is something that a very small group of Hindus do. And the point we're making with this lawsuit is we want to make sure, obviously, that VJ and his son TC get justice for the third-degree burns and permanent scars that he has. But we wanted to shine a light on this whole situation so that we can ensure no other child finds himself or herself in a scenario where they're being branded on both shoulders. Now, this occurred with no medical professionals on site whatsoever. So not surprisingly, there was no first aid administered to these folks and these children who were burned. And in TC's case, he developed an infection. We know from his victim impact statement that he had no clue this was happening. So not only did my client, VJ, have no knowledge of this and no consent to this, the child TC didn't even know this was going to happen. Now, there's no doubt his mother, my client's ex-wife, took him there. But under Texas law, both statutory and under common law, a child cannot consent to being burned or scarred. A child's mother cannot consent for her son or her daughter to be burned or scarred. Now, even if TC wanted these, he could not get it. Just like going to a tattoo parlor. I have 3 children. All 3 are minors. Not one of them can go to a tattoo parlor and get a tattoo or be burned or branded or scarred. It cannot happen. It's against the law in Texas. And this scenario is much worse because my client, the father of this boy, who has primary custody of this boy, did not either consent nor have knowledge. And so that's what we're bringing, obviously, the lawsuit about. But why hold the press conference, right? Why do a press conference on this, on a relatively straightforward issue? Because we want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. And this is happening right here in Fort Bend County in Sugar Land, Texas. And it was shocking to us when it came to our law firm. When Mr. Williams brought this case to my law firm, the first thing we said is, it doesn't matter what your religion is, you don't get to burn children. It just doesn't get to happen. And we dug a little deeper. And in fact, we're aware of no religion on the planet that says it's mandatory for a child to be burned in order to be a part of this religion. And so the point of our lawsuit is essentially to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, while also seeking justice for VJ and his client. We have multiple folks with us today. We have the father, we have VJ, we have my associate Taylor Pace, we have my of counsel and my chief of staff here at the law firm, Jennifer Stogner, also my wife. And then we have Andy Williams, who actually signed up this case and came to us in conjunction. And so we wanted to all be here to answer any questions you may have. This is it's kind of a provocative, hot topic. What you can do, where are the bounds of religion? Where are the bounds of religion with law? Where are the bounds of consent? And so these are all hot topics right now. And we just wanted to make sure this was put into the public, into the community, so we can ensure no other kids go through this type of branding, go through this type of mutilation. What we've shown you here is we have photos of the scars. Now, these were taken after because this was done without VJ's consent, and it wasn't until he got his child back in his house that he ultimately found out. And the poor little boy was pressured by everybody involved to hide this from his father. And so just think every time you take your shirt off, you go to the shower, you look at yourself in the mirror, you'll be reminded of how you were both betrayed by your family and your community and this particular religion when they branded and burned this little boy. And so that's what we're here to do. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have about what we know and what we intend to do.
Did the 11-year-old's mom consent to him having this?
That is our understanding, is that forms were filled out, that this was not just walk in and do it. This was a ceremony that was planned, and as our information says that there were 97 adults who consented and filled out forms, and the child's mother filled out this form on his behalf. But again, it's invalid consent, because a child can't consent to this and a child's mother can't consent to this. Same as the tattoo example.
So you're saying both parents should have had to consent?
Actually, what I'm saying is neither of them could. Even if VJ had known about this and had been a part of this and had drove TC up there with the boy's mother, it would still have been illegal for this particular temple and its sect members to brand this little boy. Whether both parents consent, one, none, child wants it, cannot happen because it violates the law. And so, Taylor, Mr. Pace can talk to you about that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not.
It just says they're moving those. VJ has primary custody or shared custody?
It's shared. I'm the primary managing.
Okay. And is the Fort Lee County Sheriff's Office investigating?
It's actually just because of the jurisdiction, the way it turned out, that temple is just on the borderline with the Harris County border. So Houston Police did the investigation. HPD did the investigation.
BJ, how did you feel when you found out about this?
I was shocked. I did not know how to handle it. I mean, my primary concern is for my son's well-being. I mean, he was branded, and when he finally told me what happened after they got infected, you know, they were up here on his shoulders, right? You can't see him. He's always wearing a shirt, something. And he had just started school. This is just before, so then anyways, peak of summer, got sweat, got infected, and he started crying. Then he came out and told me the whole story. And I'm like, you kept this hidden this long? This is so traumatic. I was traumatized. I couldn't do anything to protect my son. I did not even know this was going to happen. So,
I'm sorry. I was going to ask, do you know what the purpose is? Does it signify anything?
you know, these marks are of a god called Vishnu. They're symbols of Vishnu. But this ceremony, this is not even a religious ceremony. This was a cultural event that was taking place at the temple. And if you go to the website of the person who did that branding, you will see that this ceremony is about getting that person to become a disciple of that guru.
And Vijay, describe how emotional this is for you to see your son like that and describe his pain.
Man, it's difficult for me to say it now, even now, but you know, I can only I'll talk about what he feels, man. He goes to see therapists. He's so deeply scarred, mentally scarred, emotionally scarred, betrayed, etc. The pain is another side of it. He started middle school. They go to, locker rooms to change. He's so self-conscious. People, just other kids. What's that? What happened? And, he doesn't know what to say. He's got to be, it's difficult for me to explain that. But it's deep trauma. He doesn't trust any adults anymore. He doesn't want to be around with many people. And out of the blue, once in a while, he just says, why did this happen to me? Why didn't anybody stop this? And it's difficult for me to answer. Very, very hard.
I don't know, you wanting to mention something specifically about the religious freedom part, or if you don't mind, and if you were going to say something on the topic of related to the...
Yes, so you were asking some questions about consent, whether the mother consented, whether the father consented. Obviously, the father did not consent. He wasn't present. But in Texas, it doesn't matter. whether the mother consents, whether the father consents, or both. So I've got Title 25 of the Texas Administrative Code. It specifically says that you cannot tattoo, and it defines tattoo in a way that includes, even if you're not using ink, okay, any permanent mark on it, someone under 18 cannot be made unless, one, you've got the consent of the parents, but more importantly, what's not here is that it's covering up a pre-existing mark, something like a gang symbol that shouldn't have been put on in the first place. You need both of those things. And so you cannot mark a minor, in just like what happened here, you can't burn them. It specifically mentions scarring. Any cosmetic mark cannot be made unless it's to cover a pre-existing mark. So that's the law in Texas. There's no question that what happened that day is illegal in Texas, and the temple has the responsibility of knowing that for situations just like this. They need to make sure that this sort of thing does not happen.
Who's the lawsuit against, and is the investigation, is the criminal investigation by HPD, is that still open?
Well, the lawsuit is against two defendants in particular. Sure. Sure. You know, the lawsuit that we filed is against the group, and I'm going to probably murder it, but it's against the Ashtalakshmi Temple and a company called Jet USA Inc. And so those are the owners and operators of this particular temple where this took place. There may be additional defendants added, but to answer your question about the investigation, I'm not too involved in that criminal side. And to me, whether they prosecute or don't makes no difference to me. You know, because the district attorney has that ultimate discretion whether to bring charges. In this particular scenario, my client had come to us and said, "Do you think this is actionable?" And we said, "Absolutely." Not only, I mean, it's you know, obviously we've handled death cases, we've handled paralysis cases, but this was so important to us because my wife and I, we have 3 children, and we just, you know, our hearts break for children who are put through these types of scenarios where they're either trafficked, burned, what have you, because they're the most vulnerable in our society. And it breaks our heart that this was done by those who should have known better. Those, if you're going to do this, you should at least make sure you know the law, and for God's sake, have someone on hand to make sure that there's first aid administered. But again, even that would have been a Band-Aid on a broken arm. It was just, at that point, they cannot do this to this child. It can't be done. And what we've learned is they not only did it to TC that day, 2 other minors were also double branded. And we don't know how many times that's happened since or how many times it's planned to happen in the future. And so we wanted to make sure everyone knew about this so that it would be stopped. And again, I want to make sure this point is clear. This is not something that's widely done in the Hindu community. And we checked, we asked around, are we going to be violating any type of religious freedoms or any type of religious norms, right? Because that's where the law and religion could butt heads. And we checked, and this is not a common practice. This is more of a, as he mentioned, more of this particular guru, where you're going to have this scarification to show your fealty or your loyalty to this particular guru as opposed to Hinduism. And so we wanted to shut it down because it's happening right in our backyard. And this concerns all of us, I would think, you know, with children. And so I don't know what the criminal prosecution, if any, is going to yield, but I know we're not going to stop.
You just, oh, sorry. I know you had mentioned that, you know, there were 2 other minors there and other adults. So is there going to be any outreach to those families involved as well? Or, and my second question is, you don't know, this is a specific sect of this religion that does this. Is there history with this establishment of doing this in the past?
Well, one, what we think by probably bringing this to light is there may be other folks. I can, you know, obviously, if there's another scenario where there's a divorced marriage, and all of a sudden one of the parents finds out about it, we may end up getting phone calls. But more the problem is probably going to be both parents consented to it, and this is going to be brushed under the rug, and that we'll never find out. We'll never get phone calls through unless we get it through discovery. But obviously, we're not going to reach out to those children and try to put them in a way to further traumatize them. That's our, you know, I don't want to add insult to injury. And then as far as whether this has happened at this particular cultural center, we believe it has. We think it's something they were doing. Now, this is a traveling guru, and he probably goes all over the place doing this, goes to different temples doing this. But again, it's something that cannot happen. And I can't speak for other states. I would have to believe that other states' laws would also prohibit this. But all I know is for sure is that Texas law does. And our client that hired us is a Texan, so we want to make sure that this particular kid gets the justice Texas offers.
Can someone describe this photo? And you said there's a victim impact statement from the 11-year-old. Can somebody read a portion of that?
And yes, ma'am. In fact, we've got one. It's probably over here. But Andy, do you want to handle that?
Sure, but I need the microphones.
Yes.
We've got two blow-ups here of portions of a victim impact statement that the boy who we represent through his father filled out. And you can see they hear this for children. I am 11 years old. I'm in the 6th grade. How do you feel about what happened to you? He says, sad, mad, scared. And then he says, desperate, depressed, frustrated, betrayed, cheated, pressured. What is this part? Stressed, etc., etc. And this is some of the rest of the statement. This is not all of it, but this is some of the rest of it. He said, I was so surprised. I didn't know that anything was going to happen like this. I was shocked when they did it on my shoulder, and it hurted so much I almost cried. This is a little boy writing this. It hurted so much. He said, I had no idea this was going to happen. I feel betrayed. They did it again on my other shoulder. I did not know they were going to do it again. If I knew, I would not stay in line. I would have run away to stop it. And, he says, they knew what they did was very wrong because they told me to keep it secret from everyone else. But I had to tell my dad when the pain got worse and it became infected. That's the only reason we're here today, because he had to tell his dad because the medical condition got to be so bad that he needed some medical treatment. So that's where we are with that. This is not the full statement, but it gives you gives you the gist of how the boy was feeling about it and what his attitude is towards the whole thing.
Thank you. Sure. What dollar amount are you suing for?
At this point, we haven't picked a specific dollar amount. Texas law makes us put it into categories. I knew that question would come. What are you seeking in this lawsuit? And I think the fair answer would be whatever's fair compensation for his damages, and we're going to further investigate that. What would it cost for the plastic surgery to fix this? What are the past medical bills? What would be fair compensation for the emotional damage this child has suffered, for the scarring he suffered? That's issue one. But what we're really after is making sure this doesn't happen to anybody else. That's really the truth, that if we can, that's why we have the press conference, because we don't need to have a press conference in order to file our lawsuit and seek damages. So we wanted this to be something front and center for the community. And so if you ask me what am I seeking, my answer would be to make sure nobody else goes through this, no other child goes through this, no other parent has to find out about this happening to their kid without their knowledge or consent.
Unless anything else that you Jake, would like to?
Yeah, no, just, I'm Indian origin. Yeah, obviously this is Hinduism is practiced there, so at my age I'm very, very familiar with the religion, and I know that by far the vast majority of all my friends, acquaintances, family, etc., never had that done. Why was this done here in the U.S., in Fort Bend County, is one part of it. The other part of it is that in India, under the Indian Penal Code, it is illegal to brand or burn a child. And how can it happen here? How is this allowed to happen here? Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Are you Hindu?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you're saying that's your religion also, your family members, your friends, and no one that you know they've never been branded like this?
No, ma'am. And I do not believe the boy's mother has been branded. Nope.
She wasn't even branded that day?
Nope. Not was she ever branded.
So is it just for men, males?
No, there was for women too.
And then you want to add?
I mean, as a mother of 3 in the greater Houston area, the safety of my children is my greatest priority. And I want to make sure my children come home in one piece and are safe. And I know that they can fall down and they can hurt themselves, but I can't even imagine having one of my children come home with a permanent scar, or 2 of them, one on each shoulder, because my former spouse consented to a procedure that would mark their body forever. And I think what bothers me the most isn't just that that happened. That's enough. That's enough to get me as angry as I can possibly say. But what's more is that they told this little boy to hide it. They told him, don't say anything. Make sure you keep it covered. Make sure you don't tell anybody about this. So not only has he been quite literally scarred for life, not knowing that was about to happen, getting burned once, going through the shock of that, and then realizing, oh God, they're about to do it again, and then being told, now cover it up and don't tell anyone and don't show anyone. As a mama, I can't even begin to imagine that amount of trauma. And it's very clear that this is an honor student. This is a kid who's doing well in school, who's focused on what he's supposed to be focused on at 11 years old. And now we've taken him off that path because a specific guru wants his disciples to show devotion by getting branded one time and then another. That's not okay. If you're an adult and you want to do that, fine. I can't stop you. You can get tattoos, you can get piercings, you can do whatever you want to your body. But when it comes to an 11-year-old little boy, you don't get to do that in the state of Texas. You don't get to hide it. You don't get to tell him not to tell his parents. You don't get to not provide him medical aid to make sure that it doesn't get infected, that you give him some sort of antiseptic, that you put Band-Aids on it, that if you're going to do all of this, at least make sure it heals the right way. And they didn't do any of that. And then they told him to lie about it and to hide it. And that's how you know they know it's wrong. And that's why we're here, because I would be just as outraged as VJ is if my child came home with permanent marks and I didn't even find out about him because they told him, don't tell Dad. I'd be outraged. I'd be so angry I could barely see straight. And I don't want this to happen to anybody else. I am so sorry it happened to this little boy. But the only way that I know to get it to stop is to shine a light on it and to make sure the community knows that this is happening right here in Houston. And it shouldn't be. It's against the law in the great state of Texas.
Right. You know, and the other thing I'd add before we sign off today is, you know, when the intersection of religion, which this is really not religion, this is more of a subsect specific, but when it is true religion intersecting with the laws, we've already been told by the United States Supreme Court that the health, safety, and welfare of the children comes first. And this isn't, we anticipate this argument coming, right? This is part of our religion. Well, that didn't work for Tony Alamo. It didn't work for David Koresh. And it's not going to work for this temple either, because we are going to hold them accountable for every single injury and damage they did to this particular boy and his father.